Good morning. Can you all join us in singing number 216, When the Roll is Called Up Yonder?
Our next song is page 369.
Sowing in the morning, sowing seeds of kindness, sowing in the noontide and the dewy eve, waiting for the harvest and the time of reaping. We shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves, bringing in the sheaves, bringing in the sheaves. We shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves, bringing in the sheaves, bringing in the sheaves. We shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves. Sowing in the sunshine, sowing in the shadows, fearing neither clouds nor winter's chilling breeze. By and by the harvest and the labor ended, we shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves, bringing in the sheaves, bringing in the sheaves. We shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves. often grieves. When our weeping's over, he will bid us welcome. We shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves, bringing in the sheaves, bringing in the sheaves. We shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves, bringing in the sheaves, bringing in the sheaves. We shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back from, some of you were here this morning, probably most of you. I was watching live. I didn't make it here in time. But anyways, we're glad to see you all back. Before we introduce our speaker this morning, I would like to introduce our children's class teachers. So if you want to come up, Leisha and you all want to come up, and the parents get to meet you a little bit, and then they'll be taking off with your children if you care to have them in classes. Give each one of you a mic. Well, maybe we'll just do one at a time. So what can we expect? Maybe your name and kind of where you're from or your family a little bit.
Okay, my name is Carly Braun, and I live about 10 miles up the road. And I'm going to be doing, I think it's the 4 and 5-year-olds, some of the younger ones, and we're going to be over there in the church building. We're going to be talking about creation this week. I used to be an elementary school teacher. I taught at the Adventist school in Akron, but now I stay home and I teach the 2 best students there are, my children. So.
Amen. Thank you, Carly.
My name is Leisha Westcott, and we're going to be doing the juniors, which is going to be ages 6 to 12. That's not technically juniors, but 6 to 12. But the 13, 14, 15-year-olds, they can come and be my helpers if they would like. But actually, I'm hardly teaching at all. I got a whole bunch of teachers to teach along with me. One of them is this nice lady here. And my other teachers are not on the platform here, but the students won't have one teacher all the day. So it's a variety, and they're going to have a really nice time.
My name is Alice Volonovich, and I'm going to be helping with the Bible story. And I'm retired. I'm a CPA by profession, so I'll teach your kids how to save.
You want to know who keeps me in line around here? It's her. She's like my mother. She's my spiritual mother, for sure.
I was wanted to mention Tara's doing the afternoon meeting, but I haven't seen her here this morning for the younger children.
And so, if the parents want to find their children, where do they go? Where are you going to be at? You know?
We're in the church, in the Sabbath school
Okay.
classroom. You kind of have to go around one way or the other to get there.
That's right. And how about Leisha?
Our class is right inside the sanctuary.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, ladies. Thank you for doing that. I know it takes a lot of sacrifice, a lot of hard work, and you have to be very creative to work with kids. And I trust that we have. I know all these ladies well, and I know that your children will be in good hands. And so, pardon me? Yes. So, children, if you want to go to the Sabbath school, to your classes this morning, there are your teachers. You can follow them out. And so, I'm going to turn this over to Vernon. He has a few announcements, and then he'll introduce our guest speaker this morning.
Thank you, Andy. I have a couple announcements before I introduce Mark. For those of you camping here, the trailer out there is a shower trailer there for, and then also there's self-registration. If you come into the drive and you see a registration sign there, you can go in and find your name on the list and put an X behind your name. If your name is not on the list, just write your name down and put an X behind your name. So sorry if your name's not on the list, because it doesn't always, we're not perfect here, just so you know that. So at this time, I want to introduce our speaker this morning. I first met him in Bowling Green, Ohio, which is about 3 hours from here, northwest Ohio, corn country. You thought corn was only in Iowa, didn't you? Well, Ohio is the majority corn, then the Ohio State Buckeyes, and then you got coal and gas in the other end of the state. So it was about 2 years ago, I think it was 2022, a friend of ours said, hey, there's this speaker going to be in Bowling Green, Ohio. Do you guys want to join us to come out there and listen to this guy? And I asked, who is it? They said, Dr. Mark Sandoval. And I was like, who's that? Then he's a great guy, great speaker. He's a medical doctor. I think you're a medical doctor. Yeah. And so, okay, we'll go and listen to him. And we went out to listen to him, and I was so impressed. I said, well, we need him here at the camp meeting. Can you come this year to our camp meeting? This was 2022. And they said, well, we're booked out for 2 years. I said, well, can you come 2024? And they said, yeah, I think we're open August 2024. I said, okay, let's book it. Typically, the way it works to book a speaker is we have to go through the committee. And I said, well, I'll just book him, and then I'll tell the committee to approve him first. I'll book him first and tell the committee to approve him. And that is exactly what happened. So without further ado, here is Mark Sandoval to bring us message. I think it's going to be a great message, and thank you for coming and taking time with us. And the podium is yours.
Thank you.
So, yep.
Thank you. Yes. So yeah, I'm working on 2026's calendar right now. So people come up and they say, well, hey, we've got an event coming up in a couple of months, and I'm like, no. So it doesn't work that fast on my schedule. So some of you might not have been here last night. I'll just introduce myself again. My name is Mark Sandoval, and it's true, I'm a medical doctor. My background is emergency medicine and lifestyle medicine. So my first career was in the ER. I've worked in ER, ICU, in the hospital, in clinics, urgent care. I've done family practice as well. And but then I spent about 10 years, close to 10 years, at Uchee Pines Institute. Some of you may have known Dr. Agatha Thrash. So I got to learn with Dr. Agatha, and in fact, I was the one taking care of her when she passed away. And I only went to Uchee for a year. And Dr. Agatha talked me into 3 years, and at 3 years, the current president resigned, and it was my first board meeting, and he said, and I think he would be a good replacement. Unfortunately, I had just prayed before that. Well, unfortunately, but I had prayed before that, and I said, Lord, the 3 years is coming up. Do we stay? Do we go? And I said, well, if the board offers me something to do, then I'll take that as your word, and that you want me to stay and do that, whatever that is. And if they don't, then it's time for me to go and head off somewhere else. And that's when the president resigned, and then I became president. And I was just like, no, I didn't come here for administration. I came here to learn and then go start a lifestyle center somewhere. So anyways, ended up staying about 10 years. And during that time, I came to learn a lot of things. And I'm very grateful that the Lord brought me out of conventional medicine and that he brought me to Uchee Pines. And now we have our own ministry, New Paradigm Ministries in Missouri. And I'm grateful for all that the Lord is teaching us. I'm going to pray, and then let's talk. Dear Heavenly Father, I am grateful that you are God. And Lord, I ask for you to reveal yourself today. And Lord, while you have used this instrument a bit through the years, I pray that I be put aside and that Christ come forward. And Lord, we ask for that truth that sets us free. And so, Lord, I ask for you to use me as your mouthpiece today to bring that truth. And may we be troublously challenged, and may our perspective be turned upside down, and may we see things from the right perspective. This I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, since I am a doctor, I'm supposed to talk about health, and I will. I first used to talk about health in regards to pathophysiology and medications and surgical interventions and things of that nature. Then I learned to talk about health in terms of herbs and hydrotherapy and lifestyle interventions. And now I talk about health differently. Not that the things that I had learned in the past are necessarily wrong, but that they had taken a place that they shouldn't take. And error is not something that is completely new. Error is simply taking the truth and rearranging it, right? So it's taking things that are true, it's taking things that are right, but it's putting them in the wrong order so that they don't function the way that they're supposed to function. So the enemy, Satan, is not a creator. There's only one creator, and that is God. So when Satan came along, he did not create something that wasn't. He simply took what was and rearranged it. Right? And that's where evil comes from, and that's where dysfunction comes from, that's where disease comes from, and so on. You see, truth is information that puts things in the right order so that it works. And error is information that puts things in the wrong order so that it doesn't work. So is truth important? Yes, it's important. It's vastly important. And how are we going to know whether the truth we have is truth? It must work. It must work, right? If it doesn't work, it isn't true. Because the truth always works. Right? The truth always works. All right. Health. All right, stories. Stories are good. We like stories. Which story to start with? Have you ever seen a health ministries leader sick? Yeah. Yeah, so Sister White, yeah, she was quite sick along through her life. I have taken care of a number of sick health ministries leaders. And a common theme that I have found amongst them is a certain amount of distress because they have advocated health. They have advocated healthy lifestyles. They have advocated healthy diets. They have advocated exercise. They have advocated for these various different things that are good in and of themselves. These are good things, right? And they have advocated these things, and they have promoted these as being health-promoting behaviors or things to be involved in, and now they're sick. And oftentimes when I would see them, they were significantly sick. Cancer, autoimmune disease, things of that nature. And now their personal health experience, which they have been trying to hide. Why? Because their health outcomes appear to be a contradiction to the statements that they have been making and sharing. Now they're at Uchee Pines, and I'm their doctor, and I'm the one taking care of them, and they're sick, and they want to know why. Right? Why me? How can this be? Is this not something that contradicts or goes against the very things that I have been advocating. And here there are people in church, and they are eating like this, and they are behaving like that, and they are doing things that, they shouldn't be doing, and so on, and they're healthy, and they're fine, and here I am advocating health and a healthy lifestyle, and so on and so forth, and here I'm sick. How can this be? And you get a life history on them, and you check and see how they're doing diet-wise, and they've been vegetarian for the last 30 years, they've been vegan for the last 15 years, they exercise on a regular basis, they try to get 8 or 9 hours of rest every night, and you check their lifestyle, and their lifestyle's good, but they're sick. They're sick. And the question is why? How? Right. So take that, put it in the back of your mind, chew on it a little bit, and we're going to go on with some other stories. So Michelle, I call her Michelle, that's not her name, but Michelle came to us. She had stage 3C ovarian cancer. And if you don't know the stages of cancer, different types of cancer have different stagings associated with them. Ovarian cancer, as long as the tumor population remains within the peritoneal cavity, so, outside of the bowel but inside of the belly, as long as it stays in the peritoneal cavity, then it's considered a stage 3. And once it gets outside of that into some other tissues, then it's considered a stage 4. And she was stage 3C. She came to us. She had 11 tumors in her abdomen, besides the original tumor in the ovary, and she was a bit distressed. She had been through 2 rounds of chemotherapy, and each round of chemotherapy, when it was done, she had more tumors and bigger tumors than when it began, and she had been through the usual rounds of chemotherapy, and so it was recommended to her to be now involved in a clinical trial. And a clinical trial is we're going to try some things that we're not sure whether they actually work in relation to this particular cancer, but we're going to try them. And some patients are going to get randomized to actual treatment, and other ones are going to get randomized to a dummy treatment, sugar pill, placebo, something like that. And we're just going to see how it goes and who does better and how better they do, and then do the research and find out whether this should be something to be recommended to others in the future or not. Well, Michelle had gotten to the point where she was not interested in being a guinea pig. She had been an athlete in the past, and now she had gotten to the point where she could hardly walk. She was very short of breath. She was very weak. Problems. And so she decided that she was going to come to Uchee Pines, and she did. And I happened to be her doctor. And I got to, be able to interact with her. And of course, we did what we did. We work with a whole food, plant-based diet, and a little bit of fasting here and there, depending on the individual and what they can tolerate. And we had an exercise program called walking, right? And outdoors, fresh air, sunshine, natural environment, and so on, worship services in the morning and the evening, and lectures along the way, and cooking classes, and all this kind of stuff, all the things that you might expect from a lifestyle center. And by this time, I had recognized in the treatment of the patients that I had taken care of that there were issues beyond lifestyle. Right? There are issues beyond lifestyle. You see, everybody has a lifestyle that they have for a reason. And the reason is not the lifestyle. Right? Nobody has a lifestyle for the sake of a lifestyle. Everybody has a lifestyle that they have for another reason. And the reason for the lifestyle is always found here. Right? The reason is always found in the mind. And so the question is, what's the reason behind this, that, or the other thing? And if you're going to find the reason behind it, you have to go to the mind of the individual and find out what they're thinking. So I was able to meet with Michelle, and I talked with her, and I found out that in her particular story, she was struggling quite a bit in her relationship with her mother. You see, her mother was a party girl and was into drugs and alcohol and, illicit relationships and so on. And her mother, by the time that Michelle was 8, her mother figured that this child was too much of a drag on her life, and so she ended up dropping her off with the grandparents, which was a good thing because grandparents were stable, right? They were stable, and so now she was actually in a stable Christian environment, which was good for her. And then Mom went off doing her party thing and whatever. Every once in a while, Mom would come back into the picture, and she would be jealous now of the relationship that Michelle had with her grandparents, which she now called Mom and Dad. And Michelle didn't want to have anything to do with biological mom because, she rejected her and abandoned her and so on. And so now chaos would ensue for a period of time, and then Mom would go off, and then she'd continue in her drugs and alcohol and illicit lifestyle and so on. So you can imagine that Michelle was not exactly happy when she thought of Mother. Not exactly. In fact, she had a little bit of bitterness. Right? So she had a lot of bitterness associated with that, the thought of her mother. And I knew that bitterness was not going to be helpful in regards to her cancer diagnosis. Right? It's just not going to help. I mean, anybody think bitterness is like good medicine? No. Of course, we recognize that's, if anything, it's going to go in the wrong direction. So, in addition to the lifestyle and all of that kind of stuff, I needed to interact with Michelle in such a way to help her to come to freedom from the bitterness that she was struggling with in relation to her mother. So, if you have somebody who has trauma, right? So you have somebody that has trauma, and in relation to the trauma, there is bitterness, there is resentment, there are often thoughts of revenge, or at least justice, right? That's what our revenge, we call it. Right, there are these various different thoughts and attitudes in relation to that, and it's towards another individual. How are you going to help somebody resolve that? Okay. Okay. So the solution, right, is forgiveness, right? So that's going to be the solution. So let me ask you, where does forgiveness come from? All right, I forgive you. Is that where it comes from? No. How long are you going to try to forgive somebody until you're able to forgive them? Forever. Right? You will never be able to accomplish it. Because forgiveness does not come from you. Where does forgiveness come from? God. So, in order for somebody to be able to forgive, they must first be forgiven. They must first accept God's forgiveness for them, right? Individually. Because you cannot give what you do not have. And so you must come to the source to get what you need first in order to be able to give that away to others. Right? And so I challenged her that she had, in a number of different ways, one of the challenges was that if you cannot love, you cannot be whole. Right? If you cannot love, you cannot be whole. So if you are unable to love your mother because of what your mother has done, then your inability to do so will destroy yourself. It's not your mother that destroys you. She cannot. She has no capacity to do so. But you have every capacity with your own mind to destroy your own body. Now, you don't do it on purpose. You don't do it because you want to. You do it because you can't help it. Because you can't help it, right? Because you have a mindset, you have a nature that is contrary. And that nature drives you, right? But if you cannot come to love her, you cannot come to be whole in your cancer diagnosis, right? So where does love come from? From God, right? So you must, it is not an option, you must come to God and take the love that you need so that you can give the love to your mother. Now, let me ask you, what is the nature of God's love? Is the nature of God's love that it controls you? Or is the nature of God's love that it leaves you free? Leaves you free, right? So does God love your mother? All right? Does God love your mother? The druggy mother, the alcoholic mother, the illicit relationships mother, the abandoning you mother, the getting upset with your relationship that you now have with your grandparents that you call parents mother. Does God love that mother? Yes, he does. Did God ever stop at any point loving that mother? No. No. So, does God give your mother freedom to be how she is? Yes. So if you will love your mother, you will give her freedom to be how she is. You will give her freedom to be how she is. You don't have to change her in order to love her. You don't need to require her to change in order for you to love her. If you have the love of God, you will love her just as she is. Just as she is. So, you must come to God, and you must take from him a love that lets you be free to be how you are, and leaves her to be free how she is, but loves her anyways because you are now loving her with his love, not with your love. Right? So she doesn't have to change in order for you to love her. She doesn't have to improve in order for you to love her. She can be exactly as she is, and you can love her. So that was the challenge. Spend time every day with God, taking his love that you need for yourself so that you can give it to your mother and you can love her with it and you can let her be free however she is. Right? But also there's this component of forgiveness. I'll tell you what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not, you did this to me, you owe me, but I'm going to let you go. You're free. That is not forgiveness. But yet, that's how most of us understand forgiveness. And we wonder why, when we have forgiven others, when the thought of them or the memory of what they have done comes to mind, it still hurts. There's still the discomfort associated with it, and essentially the best thing that we can do is try to forget. Try to put distance between us and them, that lie that time heals all wounds. No, it doesn't. Only God heals all wounds. Right? Time only allows them to fester. Right? So, forgiveness is not you did it to me, you owe me, but I forgive you. The true foundation of forgiveness is you didn't do it to me. The true foundation of forgiveness is you didn't do it to me. Didn't Jesus say, if you have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me? Doesn't that also mean that if they have done it unto you, they have done it unto Jesus? Right? When you come to the cross, do you not exchange your life with the life of Christ's? And if you exchange your life with the life of Christ's, then after that exchange, whose life do you have? Christ's life. That's right. Whose life do you not have? Yours. And if they had done that to you before and you come to the cross and you exchange your life with Christ, who did they do that to? To Jesus. That's right. And he, as the victim of that on the cross, said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They're crazy. Right? Isn't that kind of a definition of crazy? You're doing what you don't know what you're doing? Right? They're crazy. So the true foundation of forgiveness is you didn't do it to me because you did it to Jesus, and he took it in himself on the cross and he put it to death in himself. I get the life of Christ in exchange. So I challenged Michelle with these thoughts, with these ideas. You must come to God and take that love that lets her free, lets her be free, and love her with that love so that she can be free. You don't need to control her and her behavior or anything like that. Plus, you also get to come to the cross and you get to exchange your life with the life of Christ so that now it's not you that she did it to, it's Jesus. Right? So you get to be free. Well, when Michelle came to us, her cancer markers were high. CA-125 is the usual blood test that you can look at for ovarian cancer. And her CA-125 levels were elevated. And by the time she got done with 2.5 weeks at UG Pines and, healthy diet and all that kind of stuff, her cancer markers were normal. And yes, she was praising the Lord. She was happy, excited because, things were getting better. She had a lot more energy. She could now not just, get short of breath and walking a short distance. Now she could go and she could walk at a good pace and then jog a little bit and then walk at a good pace and then jog a little bit. And she was getting her energy back and it was great. And 2 months later, she had a repeat imaging study of the abdomen and it showed that half of the tumors were gone and the remaining tumors were smaller than what they were before. Well, good. We're in the right direction. 2 months after that, 4 months after she was at UG Pines, cancer markers are back up. Okay. So I talked with her again. What happened? Tell me, what happened? Mother came back in the picture. Yep. Mom came back in the picture, and guess what? She forgot. She forgot about the forgiveness. She forgot about loving her mother and letting her mother be free and all that kind of stuff. And she was back in the bitterness and back in the resentment and back in the judgment and, justice and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, her cancer is coming back. So We had another conversation together, reminding her of these things. She started applying them again. Guess what? Cancer markers back down. Yes. So she was, I tell her story often when I go different places because she was kind of the sentinel case in my clinical career where I could see very clearly a correlation between what was going on in the mind of the individual and what was going on in their body as well. Right? Now, she's not the only case. There are many cases of this nature. Chad mentioned ulcerative colitis this morning as one of the digestive conditions that an individual might have. And ulcerative colitis, what that is an autoimmune condition where the immune system starts attacking the colon. It does so at the rectum, and then it starts working its way up the colon, and it'll continue doing so until it envelops or involves all of the colon. And if the colon is not resected or taken out, if this continues to happen, then the individual oftentimes will develop colon cancer. And so, you know, what do you try? Well, you can try changing your lifestyle, which has an effect. It does. You can try certain kind of herbs and supplements, and those can be helpful and beneficial, and we would use those at UG Pines as well. There are also medications like steroids or another medications, class of medications that we call biologics, and they essentially are trying to suppress the immune system's response so that you don't continue eating yourself up. And if that's not working, then, well, the final thing is cut out the colon. Then you don't have the target that the immune system is, you know, that system is attacking. And so another individual that I ran into, his wife was one of my patients at UG Pines, and he came to visit one of the days or a couple of days or something like that while she was there, and he happened to sit in on one of the presentations that I gave, and we had a conversation afterwards. He purchased my book, The Law of Life, and they took it home, and it sat on the shelf for a couple of months, about 4 months, I think he said. And eventually they decided, well, we need to read this thing. And so they started reading it. And when I get testimonies from people that have read The Law of Life, the testimonies usually are, well, wow, this is transformative. You know, it's changed my life. It's changed how I view things. Now, I do say at the beginning of the book, you need to read it 6 to 10 times. Because it's an entirely new perspective. It's a new paradigm, and it takes time for that to sink in. But anyways, they read the book, and it was transformative for them. They had been involved, and they had just started doing like a book club, and they decided that they were going to use The Law of Life as their book club. And so they did, and then COVID hit, and so then they switched to a virtual platform with Zoom and doing book clubs. And so they did a book club with The Law of Life, and then they did a second book club with The Law of Life, and then they did a third book club with The Law of Life. And while they were on their third time going through the book, my friend now, he had been dealing with ulcerative colitis. He had tried lifestyle change. It wasn't working. He had tried, steroids, biologics. They weren't, I mean, it was kind of keeping things under control, but it wasn't getting all that great. And he was still having symptoms and really wasn't getting over it. Well, he realized that he had an issue with a coworker where they had had a falling out in regards to some issue. And he realized that he had a responsibility both between him and God to let that individual be free, to recognize they didn't do what they did to him, right? They did it to God. But that he also had a responsibility in this as well, and he needed to go and take care of his side of the issue with the individual and to apologize and so on. Well, he did. And guess what happened? Yeah, his ulcerative colitis is gone. Gone. It hasn't come back. Right? It's gone. Because the foundation of the issue was in the mind. And when the foundation of the issue, which was in the mind, was taken care of, guess what happened to what was in the body? Yeah, it was taken care of as well. Because if you remove the cause, the effect must go away. If you remove the cause, the effect must go away. Right? So, these are just a couple of stories. There's more that we can tell. In fact, there's some testimonies in the audience that can tell. Their own testimony of how this works in their own life. So, we're told that there's a certain percentage of problems that begin in the mind. Anybody remember that? 90%. 9/10 of all disease has its foundation in the mind. Right. So, let's talk about how that works. How does that work? I used to think, because of my training and my background, I used to think that the effect of the mind on the body was simply through the choices that I make for the things that I consume and the things that I participate in and so on and so forth. And because those come as a result of choices, therefore, it's an issue of the mind. But what I have come to understand and to realize is that you can have a direct effect from thoughts in the mind to impact on the body directly. Right? Directly. And so then we wonder, all right, well, what's the pathway? How does this work? What's going on? Right? So everywhere in your body, you have nerves, right? You got nerve endings that are going to all different parts of your body. If you were to have your eyes closed and somebody was going to throw a dart at you, and they hit you with the dart, would you have to guess where they hit you with the dart? No, even with your eyes closed, you don't have to guess, right? You'll know exactly where they hit you with the dart. Why? Because you have a nerve ending in that area that doesn't go anywhere else. And that nerve ending goes to a specific spot in your brain that doesn't go anywhere else, right? So everywhere in your body has something, or representation in your brain, right? So you want a spot in your tongue? Well, there's a spot in your brain that's attached to that spot in your tongue. And you want a spot in your knee? Well, there's a spot in your brain that's attached to that spot in the knee. And it's wired very specifically. It's very well regulated. And everybody's brain is wired the same way. Now, there are some very minor differences. And yes, there can be some developmental problems that happen with that wiring in certain individuals, but essentially everybody has the same wiring and the same way that things go. So that essentially the right side of your brain controls the right side of your head and the left side of your body. And the left brain controls the left head and the right body. So head is same side as the brain, body is opposite side as the brain. Right? So the fibers cross before it goes down into the spinal cord and then goes down to the rest of the body and so on. So you might find an interesting phenomenon happening in individuals where they can have something going on in the right side of the head and the left side of the body, and it's the same issue. Different parts of the body, but it's the same issue. Right? The same issue. And since everything is well regulated that way, and in very different, very specific locations, it's quite interesting how specific the manifestations might be. For example, let's run through a few different scenarios and ask ourselves the question of what might be going on. So here we have an artery, And, all right. So what's going on here? Okay, so we've got plaque, and what's in the plaque? All right, so we're told it's cholesterol, right? And, it's got fibrous tissue and other things like that. And then you get a little bit of blood flow that's coming through here, and things are blocked, and so on, so it becomes a problem. Now, when I've done, cardiology rotations and followed the cardiologist around, and I get to watch them while they do their angiograms, and they put the catheter in the groin, or sometimes now in the arm, and then they go up and they get it close to the heart, and now with an x-ray machine they squirt some dye, and then they take some x-rays of it, and they look and they see that, oh, there's a narrowing of the artery right here, right? And let's say that this is the left circumflex artery, coronary artery in the heart. And so if you have that blockage in the left circumflex coronary artery, well, it's going to be problematic because it's going to affect the upper portion of your left ventricle, and that's where you get a lot of your muscle contraction for pumping blood to the rest of the body. This can turn into a heart attack, and that would be problematic, and so on. Now, we're told that the cause is cholesterol, right? So it's a dietary issue. It might be a genetic issue, but it's because of high cholesterol levels. Now, let me ask you the question, how much cholesterol is right here versus how much cholesterol is right here versus how much cholesterol is right there in the bloodstream? Yeah, it's all the same, right? Because when you ate that hamburger and the french fries and milkshake and all that kind of stuff, the cholesterol that you got from it gets digested, it gets into the bloodstream, and now it circulates through the bloodstream. And if you've ever learned anything in chemistry, hopefully you learned the principle of dilution. I mean, not dilution, diffusion. No, that goes along with dilution. Diffusion, right? What is diffusion? All right, so if you have some kind of chemical substance in a liquid environment, then it's going to start getting itself into a fairly even concentration throughout that environment. And you might have seen the chemistry experiment where the chemistry teacher puts a few different bowls, clear glass bowls on the table, and they get some dye. And they drop 5 drops of dye in this one, and 5 drops of dye in that one, and 5 drops of dye in that one. It just happens to be that in one bowl it has ice water, in the other bowl it has room temperature water, and in the other bowl it has hot water. So when you drop those dye into the different bowls, which one mixes up faster? The hot one. And which one lasts the longest? The cold, right? Takes the longest in the cold one. And so that's just to show you that at higher temperatures, molecules are moving faster. And if they're moving faster, then it's going to mix and mingle a lot faster. But you know how you can get the cold water to beat the hot water? Stir it. That's right, you stir it up. Now you get some good molecular movement that's in there, and you mix everything together, and now the cold one got, you had diffusion happening a lot faster in there. What happens in your cardiovascular system? Does it get stirred up? Yeah, it gets stirred up. You have a heart pump, that's pumping, and you've got valves that it's going through, and you've got blood vessels that it's going through, and it's circulating. It's like a big stirring pot. So if you get stuff in from your digestive tract and it gets into your bloodstream, you just give it a few seconds, and guess what? Even distribution, right, throughout all of the bloodstream. So you got the same cholesterol concentration here as you have there, but you have the plaque right there. So, how come the plaque is right there, but not there? What's that? All right, lesions or abrasions in the artery. Yes, I understand the theory. So let's talk about that theory. Because that is the prominent theory of having plaque, you know? So you have some kind of injury to the inside of the blood vessel, and because of that injury to the inside of the blood vessel, then you start having an inflammatory response and you start developing a plaque in that area. All right, so let me challenge you with this thought. Have you ever cut yourself before? Yeah, how long did you bleed? Yeah, it depends. You know, it depends on how big of a, how big of a blood vessel that you cut, and what you cut it with, and how hot the weather is, and how hydrated you were, dehydrated, other things like that. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But are you still bleeding from you cutting yourself a few years ago? No. No. What happens when you cut yourself? If you don't die, you heal, right? And when it comes to blood vessels, the healing process is pretty fast. Right? It's pretty fast. Now, do you know how long this takes? Years. Decades even. So how come you have an injury that takes years or decades to heal when any other time you damage a blood vessel and it heals quick? Right? All right, things for us to think about. Okay, so there's a theory that if you continue ingesting the cholesterol, the body's going to stop fighting against it and so on. The reality is that you need cholesterol. You will die without it. It's necessary for life. You can't think without cholesterol. You can't heal without cholesterol. Your cells cannot move without cholesterol. It's an integral part of the cell membrane. Without it, we would crack if we tried to move. You need it as part of the membrane for electronic transmission in the neurons and so on and so forth. It is absolutely necessary for life. You don't need too much of it. That's the problem, right? You don't need too much of it. So, what's going on here? All right. Anybody ever had gout? Anybody know what gout is? Okay. I was about to draw a picture, but I'm afraid of drawing the picture because me and pictures are not so great. All right. So, you get the idea that... There we go. My pictures are not so great. And about there at the first metatarsal phalangeal joint is the most common place for an individual to have, it's right there at the base of your big toe, right? Most common place for somebody to have gout. And in that location, it's called podagra, right? And let's just say that this is the right foot. And so an individual has gout there in that toe. What is gout associated with? Anybody know the chemical that's in it? Uric acid, right? So uric acid. And yes, it used to be called the rich man's disease and so on. So uric acid is associated with it. If we wanted to know, we could go to that toe joint. We could pull out the fluid from it. We could look at it under a certain microscope, and we could see the refraction pattern, and then we could see that, okay, well, that's uric acid crystals. There's also another condition called pseudogout, and it has a different type of chemical that's associated with it, and it looks differently under that refraction microscope that you're looking at it. But that's besides the point. So your gout is most common. It's uric acid that's there, and the person has the problem in their toe. Now, in the emergency department, I've taken care of people with gout, and sometimes they have it in the right toe, sometimes their left toe, sometimes both toes, sometimes other joints too. Why? Somebody can tell us by personal experience why. Right. All right. So we say that, okay, what's happening? So uric acid becomes hyperconcentrated in the joint space. And when it becomes hyperconcentrated, it crystallizes. And now it forms crystals. And it forms crystals almost like needles. And those crystals, like needles, are there inside the joint, and then they poke into the joint and the edges of the joint, and it's very painful and inflamed and swollen and all of that kind of stuff. It's horrible. Yeah, it's horrible. That's right. I don't know from personal experience, but I know by taking care of many patients with gout, and I've seen them squirm and hobble and, at 2 o'clock in the morning come crying to me because they can't sleep anymore with this, and you can't even have the sheet go across your toe at all. I mean, that's just torture. In order for, and you want relief, right? That's fine. Relief is fine. All right. So let's say that this individual has gout in the right foot, but they don't have gout in the left foot. If I want to find out whether you have gout, I'm going to send you to the lab, or if you're in the ER, I'm going to have the lab technician come to you, and they're going to draw your blood. Where are they going to draw your blood from? Yeah, typically your arm or your hand. Have you ever had a lab technician come and draw blood from your foot? Doesn't happen often. Right? Intensive care unit, when you can't find veins other places, sometimes you'll go for the foot. I've had to do that before, but usually you're going from the arm or the other arm. Does it matter which arm you get it from? No. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Does it matter if they got it from an artery or a vein? Well, it matters to you. But as far as the test is concerned, does it matter? No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you got it from. I don't care if you got it from the left side, the right side, the top side, the bottom side, the front side, the back side. I don't care where you got it. Why? Because everywhere uric acid is going to be the same. It's going to be the same concentration of uric acid anywhere in your bloodstream. So I don't care where you get it from. I know what your uric acid levels are. So how much uric acid was going to your right foot as going to your left foot? Same, but the problem's in your right foot, not your left foot. Why? Okay, usage or wear. Okay, so that's getting to some principles. If we have a problem that is localized, right? So it's in one location of a particular type of tissue, but not in another location of a particular type of tissue. The question is, what is it that can cause something to be localized? One is trauma, physical trauma. Because you can nail a nail gun. With a nail gun, you can nail a nail through that joint, but you didn't nail the nail through other joints. So you can cause trauma to one part of the body without causing trauma to other parts of the body. So yes, you can have localized trauma, and then you can have a localized manifestation of problems where you have that localized trauma. You have somebody, and they have, let's do it. That one was right side. Let's do this one left side. So let's say that they have a tumor that's growing over here on the left lung. We'll call it the left lung, right? So you have a left-sided tumor that's growing there. Well, what's associated with lung cancer? Smoking. All right, so let's say that this individual never smoked in their life, which is most often the case with somebody that has lung cancer. Right. Most often they have not been smoking, and so on. And so what else? Secondhand smoke, okay. Pollution, radon, like from new furniture, new carpets, other things like that. So there's a type of cancer called a mesothelioma that's associated with asbestos exposure and so on. That one is usually on the lining of the lung or the outside lining of the lung, and so on. All right, so we might have meat consumption over a long period of time, somebody that's exposed to a particular toxin, other things like that, unhealthy diet, smoking, all those different types of things. Okay, well, when let's say this individual did smoke. When they smoked, did they make sure that all the smoke went right there? No. When they smoked, where did it go? Both sides, right? And when somebody ate the unhealthy diet, where did the unhealthy diet go? Everywhere. It didn't just go to the right, to the left side. It went everywhere, right? And when you absorb some toxin, you had some radon exposure or something like that, well, where did it go? Everywhere. So how come you have the tumor right there, but your exposure was everywhere? Okay. All right. So the only other thing that can lead to a localized manifestation inside of a particular type of tissue is the mind. It's the only other thing. You've got two options. It's either trauma or it's the mind. Right? So if you spilled acid on that part of the toe and now you have a manifestation in that part of the toe, well, that's localized trauma. Right? So you had a localized exposure that's going on in that area. If you somehow injected cholesterol into the artery wall in that location, well, then that would be a localized trauma associated with cholesterol, and you could imagine that you would have a plaque there because of that. If somebody injected uric acid into that joint, well, then that would be a logical reason as well. So you can have localized trauma, or it's going to be the mind, because guess what you have in this location of the artery that you don't have over here and over there? A nerve ending. You have a nerve ending that's right there in that part of the artery. And that nerve ending is attached to a place in your brain that no other nerve ending is attached to. It's like having the key on the piano that hits a string that no other key on the piano hits. Except in the brain, you have billions of keys instead of 88 keys. Right? And those billions of keys are attached to billions of locations throughout the body. Right? And so you have a nerve ending that is in that location of the lung, and you have a nerve ending that is in that toe. And now you have a problem. Now, if you ever went walking down the beach and you saw a sandcastle, what would you conclude? Somebody built the sandcastle. I don't know anybody, even in an atheistic audience, that believes that the sand built the sandcastle. No one. And I've asked the question in many countries, sometimes very secular and sometimes very religious. We're in a very religious section right now, right? But I have asked these questions all over, and nobody believes that the sandcastle came by chance or that the sand built the sandcastle. But could you have a sandcastle without the sand? No. No sandcastle without the sand. So you have to have the chemicals, but you also have to have the builder. Right? You have to have the chemicals, but you also have to have the builder. And science recognizes the chemicals. Right? Chemicals environment, genetics. That's what science is going to focus on. It's going to focus on the chemicals, it's going to focus on the environment, it's going to focus on genetics. Why? Because science is inherently atheistic. The fundamental principle of modern science is the evolutionary theory. And evolutionary theory says that matter generated itself, that matter organizes itself, that matter regulates itself, that when matter organizes itself sufficiently, it now generates life. So life is the effect of matter. And when matter regulates itself or organizes itself even more complex, it generates thought. And when it becomes even more complex, that thought can become morality, judgment, forethought, understanding, reason, and so on. Right? So science would tell us that matter is the cause and spirituality or spiritual things are the effect. Thought is an effect of matter. Reason is an effect of matter. Judgment, morality, so on and so forth, is the effect of matter. And so since science believes that matter is the cause and the spiritual is the effect, then science focuses on the physical as the cause, and so therefore it must address the physical as the solution. Right? Since in their construct, the matter is the cause, then that means you must treat the matter in order to fix it because you must treat the cause. What if they're wrong? What if they're wrong? What if matter is not the cause? What if matter is the effect? Well, what does the Bible say? Genesis 2 and verse 7. Somebody want to read that, or you want to recite it for me? You got it memorized? Okay, so God formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed into him the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So we understand as Seventh-day Adventists that we do not have a soul, we are a soul. And the soul is made up of two things: dust and breath. Now, dust, which is relatively simple in its arrangement, became a very complex body. Right? Now, it's the same stuff, but it's now in a more complex arrangement. And the breath becomes what? A very complex spirit. And the combination of body and spirit is you, the soul. All right. So, which comes first in creation? And creation, period. In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. What did Jesus say God was? God is spirit. That's right. And in John chapter 1, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And it goes on to say that by him all things were made that were made, and without him was nothing made that was made. So God is spirit. The Word spoke, all right, and we go back to Genesis chapter 1. God said, let there be light, and there was light. God said, let there be a firmament, and there was a firmament. God said, let there be land, and there was land. God said, let there be, and so on. So God spoke, and it was. And what was Jesus' testimony about the words that he spoke? They are spirit, and they are life. So God, who is spirit, spoke what is spirit, and from that came what? Everything. Everything. So, what is cause and what is effect? Is matter cause and spiritual the effect? No. According to the Bible, which is completely contradictory to science, spirit is cause and matter is effect. Completely the opposite. Completely the opposite. So if the Bible is true, where are we going to find the cause? In the spiritual. In the spiritual. That's where we're going to find the cause. The effect will manifest in the physical, but we will find the cause in the spiritual. Right? So, what is it that directs you? Your body or your spirit? It's the spirit. What is it that follows the direction? The body or the spirit? The body, right? So it's the spirit that directs. It's the body that manifests, right? That follows. And when you think of the spirit of the individual, where are you looking? The mind. That's right, you're looking at the mind. So you will find the cause in the mind. And hence, Spirit of Prophecy says 9/10 of diseases have their foundation in the mind. Right? So, since you have things regulated so wonderfully, through the mind, you get to control all of the body. Now, since the mind contains not just the brain, it's not just the brain does not think. I know, oh, there's another statement. All right. The brain cannot think any more than your liver can think, any more than your kneecap can think, any more than anything else made of matter can think. Right? Your brain itself is made up of what? Chemicals. Chemicals. You take the periodic table of elements, right? All of those 100-some different elements that are there that you can find, and the brain's going to have quite a few of them, and it will have some of them in lots of quantity and other ones in a little bit of quantity, and it has it in a certain arrangement. Do you know a single proton, neutron, or electron that can think? Any combination of protons, neutrons, and electrons that can decide? Any molecule or combination of molecules that can like something or not like it? No. Matter does not have spiritual qualities. Matter does not have spiritual capacities. You do not have the spiritual qualities and capacities that you have because of the matter that is in your body. You have the spiritual capacities and qualities that you have because of the Spirit that has been given to you. Now, we as human beings do not exist just as a spirit. So if the spirit is separate from the body, what functions? Nothing. Nothing. So we recognize that. It only functions together with the body. It never functions separate from the body. So I'm not talking about some kind of entity that can go floating off and have its own thoughts and do other things like that. No. It's simply your spirit that you are created with that must interact with your body in order to function, and only functions when it interacts with your body, right? And you are a soul. Now, your mind was created to function by what? Truth or error? How do you know? Because you were created in God's image. And He is the way, the truth, and the life. So you were created to think according to the truth. And when your mind thinks according to the truth, the mind can then control the rest of the body the way that it's supposed to, so that it can function. Because again, truth puts things in the right order so that it works. What happens if the mind is under the influence of error? Then it cannot control the body the way that it's supposed to. When the mind is under the influence of error, it cannot control the body the way that it's supposed to. And you will see physical dysfunction as a result. Right? You'll see that as a result. And it could be something as generalized as the fight or flight response, and the big rabid dog starts chasing you, or you're in a different country and the hyenas are after you, or whatever it is, and you have now, from a single thought of fear, a signal being sent down to your hippocampus, and then you have that signal sent back to your brainstem, and then that through your spinal cord to your sympathetic chain ganglia, and then that off to different areas, including your adrenal glands, and then you're releasing epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, other things of that nature. That gets into your bloodstream, very quickly circulates throughout. Your heart rate increases, your pupils dilate, your blood pressure increases, your liver starts dumping glycogen or breaking down glycogen into glucose, so your blood sugar levels go up, your blood fat levels go up, your blood clotting factors increase, blood flow increases to your muscle and your brain but decreases to your skin, and so on. And all of this happens just like that in a response to a single thought. So it can be generalized, and it can change all of your physiology within milliseconds, or you can have a single thought repeated over and over and over and over again, and that thought ends up right here in that artery. Not that it's the thought itself that ends up in that artery, but there's a signal that is sent by the nerve and a chemical that's released by the nerve ending, and in response to that chemical that's released by that nerve ending, you now have a response by the white blood cells and so on in that area, so that you have an inflammatory response. And when you have extra cholesterol in the system, and that's been picked up by white blood cells, and now they call them foam cells, and those go to try to figure out what's going on, and they end up dying in that area, and they leave their payload of cholesterol behind. As long as that signal continues to be there, the process will continue. And science's solution is to fix the sand. When you have a sandcastle builder, that's building the sandcastle. Now, is it wrong to address the sand? No, it's not wrong to address the sand, because that's involved in the process. Although, if you address it completely and you eliminate all cholesterol, you die, because you need it. Right? You need it. And in fact, there are concerns that there are many complications that are coming because of too low cholesterol levels, i.e. there are some thoughts that dementia and other things that are developing are because we are actually pushing cholesterol levels too low. Whether that's the case, I don't know. I can't confirm it or not. But I know that if all you do is monkey around with the chemicals, you can't control it very well. You can't. But if you can get on top of the sandcastle builder, and you can change things with the sandcastle builder, now you can get some real progress in some real areas of somebody's real life. Right? And things begin to change and turn around. Right? Now, let's address a few other issues that are always of concern with individuals. These are localized. You've got trauma in the mind. What about these things over here that they're talking about? All right, chemicals. Let's talk about chemicals. Unless you have an exposure to a particular area, like you drop battery acid on one part of your body, and that's where you have the exposure. In general, when we're talking about chemicals, we're talking about those things that have been absorbed into us. Whether it's through the skin, we've come into contact with it, it's absorbed through the skin, gets into the bloodstream, circulates around. Whether it's through what you breathe and it gets through the respiratory tract and into the bloodstream and circulates around, or whether it's what you ingest and through the digestive tract, it gets into the bloodstream and circulates around. So since chemicals come to us in this form of getting into the bloodstream and circulating, and we recognize already that chemicals are going to be in a similar concentration throughout the bloodstream in general, then we would not expect chemicals to create a localized problem amongst a certain type of tissue. Right? We wouldn't. Because if this was actually a cholesterol issue, what we should see is this. And you get some blood flow over here, and you get some blood flow over here, but all of that is blocked off with cholesterol. Right? That's what you should see if it was a cholesterol problem. Now, it's true that certain tissues will use certain chemicals faster than others. So if you run out of iodine, where is it going to hit you first? Thyroid. Because the thyroid uses iodine the fastest. So if you have an iodine deficiency, yes, you're going to find it localized to the thyroid, but guess what? You're not going to find it localized in the thyroid. You'll find it localized throughout the thyroid because the thyroid itself and the tissue in it uses that iodine quickly. So you would not find a nodule here, a nodule there, and a nodule there if it was an iodine issue. You would find the entire thyroid being affected. So if you have a thyroid problem and you've got nodules that are involved in it, you're either talking physical trauma or the mind. But if it's throughout the entire thyroid, it could be chemicals. It could be. Right? That could be a cause. And you're deficient in something that you need and it needs to be supplemented. Or you have too much of something and you have a toxicity, but it's going to affect the entire thyroid. What if we went on down here and you have this snaky thing that goes around and around in circles and so on and so forth and whatever in there, and you have that stomach and all that kind of stuff, and you have a tumor right there in the colon. Is that caused by a chemical? No. Cannot be. Because if it was the chemical, where would you find it? Throughout the colon, right? It should be involving the whole colon and not just that part of the colon because you have the same type of tissue throughout the rest of the colon. Now, it might show up in the colon first because it has certain types of tissue and not in another place at the same time.